December 18, 1944, 2:47 in the morning. The frozen earth outside Bastogne, Belgium has become a graveyard waiting to happen. Temperatures have crashed to 14 degrees below zero. A blizzard howls across the Ardennes, burying men alive in their foxholes. American soldiers surrounded, starving, freezing clutch rifles they can no longer feel. German Panzer divisions encircle them like wolves. Ammunition is nearly gone. Rescue is impossible. In 3 hours, every single one of them will die. That is not speculation. It is military mathematics. The assault orders have already been given. The German tanks are already moving. 300 American souls are about to be erased from history. But in one frozen foxhole, a 22-year-old corporal named Eddie Voss holds a captured German radio against his frost-bitten ears. He is listening to the enemy plan his death, and he is about to do something absolutely forbidden, something that could get him executed, something that will change everything. What Eddie Voss did that night was a court-martial offense. Military law explicitly prohibited it. His commanding officers had forbidden it under penalty of death. Yet when the sun rose over Bastogne on December 18, 1944, 300 American soldiers were still breathing. They went home to their families. They held their children. They grew old. And for 70 years, almost no one knew why. This is the story of a weapon forged not in a factory, but in a grandmother's kitchen. A weapon more powerful than any Panzer tank, a weapon called voice. Eddie Voss was born into a German-American family in the American Midwest during the 1920s. His grandmother, as an immigrant from Bavaria, refused to let her native tongue die in the New World. She spoke to young Eddie in German from the moment he could listen, not textbook German, real German. The lilting dialects of southern Bavaria, the sharp consonants of Prussian military speech, subtle rhythms that separated a native speaker from an imposter. By the time Eddie was drafted into the United States Army Signal Corps in 1943, he possessed something extraordinary. He could speak German so flawlessly that native speakers assumed he was born in Munich. But in 1944, America speaking perfect German was not a gift. It was a liability. German Americans faced suspicion everywhere. Eddie kept his fluency quiet, became a radio operator. Nothing special, nobody important. Then came December 1944. The German military was supposed to be finished. American intelligence was certain of it. Nazis had no capacity for major offensive operations. General Eisenhower himself believed victory was inevitable. They were catastrophically wrong. On December 16, 1944, 3 German armies launched Operation Autumn Mist through the Ardennes forest. 200,000 German soldiers, 1,400 tanks. The Americans were caught completely unprepared. Units were surrounded. Communications collapsed. The 101st Airborne Division became trapped in Bastogne. No supplies, no reinforcements, no hope. Eddie Voss found himself in a frozen foxhole on the American perimeter, monitoring a captured German radio transceiver. His orders were simple. Listen and report. Do not transmit. Do not communicate. Do not break radio silence under any circumstances. Violation meant court-martial, possibly execution. Through the static and snow, Eddie heard German voices, Panzer commanders coordinating an assault. Grid coordinates, timing, objective markers. The attack would begin at dawn. The target was the American eastern flank, exactly where Eddie sat. Every word was perfectly clear, every detail was precise. 300 Americans would be overwhelmed before they could react. Eddie reported immediately to his commanding officer. Intelligence was filed, nothing happened. There was nowhere to move, nothing to do. The men were trapped. And that's when Eddie Voss made his choice. He possessed something no other American soldier in that foxhole had. He could become German, not pretend to be German, become German. He could impersonate a Wehrmacht officer so convincingly that German commanders would obey him without question. What he was contemplating was insane. It was illegal. It violated every rule of military engagement, unauthorized psychological warfare, impersonating an enemy officer, breaking radio silence during combat. Any one of these offenses could get him shot. But 300 men were going to die. Eddie began crafting his message in the darkness. He rehearsed silently, whispering to himself, adjusting every syllable until his grandmother's voice merged with the cold authority of a German field commander. He needed to sound not just German, but like a German officer with the authority to redirect panzer divisions. When he informed his superior officer of his plan, The response was immediate. "That's a court-martial offense, Corporal. You're talking about impersonating the enemy on their own frequencies? Every protocol we have forbids this." The officer's hands trembled. Not from cold, from the weight of what was being asked. Word traveled up the chain of command. Field officers gathered. Military lawyers were consulted by radio. The answer was unanimous. This was explicitly illegal. The Uniform Code of Military Justice forbade it, absolutely. But the casualty projections were also unanimous. 300 dead Americans by morning. A major in the Signal Corps made the decision that would define Eddie Voss's legacy. Do it. Make the transmission. At 2:47 a.m. on December 18, 1944, Eddie Voss pressed the transmit button. His voice flowed across the frozen darkness in flawless German. The accent was perfect. The military terminology was precise. The authority was absolute. Panzer Column Eisenfaust. This is Division Command. Your assault vector is being redirected. New objective coordinates follow. Priority target designation. Supply depot at grid reference 74-9er. This objective supersedes current assignment. Redirect immediately. Acknowledge. Bulge. Silence. Static. Then a German voice confirmed receipt. The Panzer column shifted direction. The assault that would have annihilated 300 sleeping Americans simply turned away. The attack never came. For 90 minutes, the deception held perfectly. German commanders accepted the order without question. By the time Wehrmacht headquarters realized something was wrong, that no such order had ever been issued, the tactical situation had changed completely. American forces had repositioned. Artillery support had been called. The element of surprise was gone. American casualties on December 18, 1944, in the Bastogne sector, 0. 300 men lived because a 22-year-old corporal spoke with his grandmother's voice into a radio in the frozen dark. The aftermath was chaos. Military lawyers debated for hours. Or the action was illegal. The results were undeniable. What do you do with a soldier who broke every rule and saved 300 lives? The decision came from the highest levels. The incident would be classified. The records would be sealed. Eddie Voss would not be prosecuted. He would not be decorated. He would not be promoted. He would be quietly transferred to another unit, his actions buried in military archives marked too classified for public memory. For 70 years, Eddie Voss kept silent. He returned to civilian life after the war. He never gave interviews. He never sought recognition. When military historians finally declassified his records in 1975, his story remained a footnote, a detail, a name in dusty files. In one of his only interviews, given to military historians in the 1980s, Eddie Voss said simply, "I had a gift. Those men were going to die without warning. I could give them a chance. That's what I did. I gave them a chance." When asked if he regretted breaking orders, he paused. Orders exist for a reason, but so do men's lives. When those two things conflict, you have to decide what you can live with. I was willing to face court-martial. I was not willing to watch 300 men die when I could do something. Eddie Voss died in 1998 at 75 years old. He was buried with full military honors. His service record was amended to reflect unauthorized military action, resulting in exceptional preservation of American lives. 300 American soldiers came home because one young man with his grandmother's voice decided that saving lives was worth more than following rules. That is the story the United States Army buried for 70 years. That is the story of Eddie Voss.